Welcome to Short Fiction Talk with Eno. Today, our guest star is Jimelle Smith. We are going to be discussing some short fiction stories that me and Jimelle have been reading, like A&P, Skin, The Sniper, The One Who Walks Away from O'Malley's, The Mask of the Red Death, and this one's backwards, sorry. The Hunger Artist, and The Demon Lover, and The Bet. The first story that we're going to talk about today is called A Hunger Artist. And the theme that we decided to come up with was that entertainment is always changing and people move on from the past. What we mean by this is that in the story, throughout the story, they showed how the man was in the cage and he was fasting, and people were so excited to see him and see how he was living. But then towards every single day, since they saw him every single day, they decided that it started getting boring and they wanted something new. And
I can relate to that, to the real world, as how back in the 80s everyone wanted an afro and how it was the coolest thing ever, but today's date everyone's got straight hair or something and it's out of fashion, and you'd be looked at differently in today's date if you had an afro in your hair.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's The Mask of the Red Death. And the theme that we came up with for that one was death will meet everyone, so don't try to fight it because you'll lose. And I think that's a good point in this case scenarios because rich people think that they can get away with anything and not have anything caught up to them because they're rich. And this shows a perfect example as to how that doesn't matter when death comes to find you because it's over. You can't fight that. What do you think about that?
Right, and in the story, the rich people are in this nice, fancy building while everybody that's under them is outside dying. But they really know deep inside that every hour there's someone dying. And so, yeah, I think that this theme really explains that. Mm-hmm. And our next story is The One Who Walks Away from O'Malley's. And this story talked about how, this theme that we came up with was that some of us are trapped in this cruel world and we still search for happiness. And sometimes we feel as though, in the story, it showed that how some people have to make sacrifices for other people's happiness. And we thought that was selfish. So,
yeah, and another thing that I thought about this story is that it was strange how everybody knew about the child that was in the basement sacrificing everything for the happiness of the people. They knew about it, but yet nobody ever did anything about it to take that down, and they just lived their happy lives. But although there were some that left, and I think I might have been one of the people that were to leave the city if I were a part of this story. The next story is The Bet, and the theme that we came up with was too much self-pride can destroy you in the end. And I think that tied into the story well because the lawyer had too much confidence in him believing that he could go through prison without any trouble or harm, and he came out the most hideous person ever with a bunch of knowledge, but it never helped him anywhere because he can't move or anything because he's so broken and old, and so he's just trapped in his own world of knowledge that will never help anybody. What about you?
And I can relate this theme of too much self-pride can destroy you to George Bush in a way, because he went into the whole presidency thing saying, oh, I can make change, I can do this, but coming out with all the wars that happened in the Middle East and so many people just not really hating him now. And so I feel all that self-pride just boiled up, I guess, and it led him to the wrong path. So yeah. Next story is Skin, and the theme for this story is society doesn't have to be the thing to describe who you are. And I feel it fits perfectly for this story because Jiroli was the base for the little Kumuk's tattoos. And I think he only did that because he wanted to show off and he wanted to feel like he could be something in this society. And that's how the society made him feel, you know? And sometimes that happens in the real world.
Yeah,
So.
like when rich people want to show off their money, not by waving it into others' faces, but by having a famous painting on their walls that means nothing to them, but it just shows that they have the money to buy something like that.
Right, and like throughout the whole story, it was just, to me, that's what just was like calling out to me. Like Jolie just wanting the money that comes from it and the fame, but then he loses all of that in the end. So it basically took him nowhere.
And he dies and gets his
Yeah.
skin ripped off of his back.
So, yeah. This story is called The Sniper, and the theme for this story was, the world can blind you and make you forget where you stand and where your surroundings are. And we decided to come up with this theme for the story because of first the setting and the time and place, because the person couldn't see what he was fighting at or who he was shooting at, and we feel as though it was the government and society that had effect and that blinded him from his enemy, which happened to be his brother. And it can be related to the real world because
like the war that we still have today, all we're focusing on is defeating the other person and success for us. And we're not remembering that they have lives just like we do, and they have families just like we do, and we're only thinking about success and just defeating them while they're like suffering, and we're suffering in our own surroundings too. So, yeah.
Last story is called The Demon Lover, and this was one of our favorite stories. And the theme of this story is to make sure that you're aware of your surroundings and think whatever you did in the past wouldn't come back to haunt you. We're talking about being aware of your surroundings because when she first comes into the house, she hears the noises and she feels the weird vibes, but still she doesn't do anything about it. She like still stays in the house and starts wandering around. And if I was in her place, I wouldn't do that. And then the second part about never thinking that what you did in the past wouldn't come back to haunt you is how when her husband went into the military and because of the war, and then he went MIA, she was of course depressed, but not so depressed like she should have been.
And she didn't stay faithful to her vows of
Right.
staying and believing that he'd come back.
Right, and then she got married and had some kids and went on with her life, and so I guess it's her husband coming back to haunt her. And we could relate it to the real world because kids our age, we aren't aware of our surroundings. We're just like, oh, we're out there to have fun and we don't care what the consequences are. And I don't think we should do that because in the future, when we grow up, those things are going to come back to haunt us and bother us in our like jobs and interviews. So yeah.